Hello, hi, Mike. Hi. Delighted to be here.
It's great to have you. I've long wanted to speak with you. So, for those who don't know him, Professor Eddie Obeng is something of a hero of mine. I read his first book when it came out in 1994, and it had a real effect on the way I thought about projects. And ever since, I've been talking about it to clients and training. But not only is Eddie an author, he is an inspiring educator. I think at Duke University in the US, at Henley in the UK, and at Pentacle in the virtual world. He is the founder of his own business school. He's also an innovator. He's a thinker of revolutionary thoughts, and change is his stock in trade. And it all began with that first book, All Change, the Project Leader's Secret Handbook. And that's why I wanted to speak with you today, Eddie, about change.
Brilliant.
And I mean, as I say, I first became aware of you through this book. And although it came out in 1994, I think the ideas are still fresh. They still have real value for project managers, not least as a framework for thinking about the work we do. So for viewers who may not be familiar with the book, and I'll put a link in the description so people can buy it. It's still available. Could you summarize what you think are the essential and lasting insights that you committed to this book?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So All Change came about because I was in a business school and I was fed up of reading books about case studies of successful companies.
Yeah.
Because they described, I don't know, some company or other which had done amazing things. But the reality was, everyone I was working with did not have 40,000 staff or a big brand or anything else like that. So writing those stories for them, I didn't feel was helpful. The other thing was, I was very aware that most of the projects people touched didn't work out as they planned. I think the stats are still quite similar. So a quarter of them sort of work when you pretend you got what you were looking for.
Yeah.
About a quarter of them fail miserably and you're embarrassed. And about half of them, I call them Vamprojects and Poltergeist Projects. Projects will just suck the living blood out of everyone, and Poltergeist Projects hang around, spooking everyone, smelling bad, never ever leaving. So there was a need to understand why these projects were going wrong, because people are not stupid. There must be a reason. So I tried to understand what the drivers were. And I spotted things like when you talk about project success, you're actually talking about something quite complicated. Everyone actually was sort of simple. So there would be things you had to deliver, an outcome. And then you'd have things like, is it fast, good, or cheap? I talk about the outcome being fast, good, or cheap. But also, all the actions as you go along, are they fast, good, and cheap? Are they the right ones? But then you have these things called human beings. And for some reason, they're associated with projects. An example I use is someone comes and works in your house. They fix the plumbing, whatever it is. They do a great job, good deliverables. While they were there, they didn't break the walls. But you still say, I'll never have that person in my house again. Why was that? It has nothing to do with the work. It has nothing to do with the outcome. It's because they were creepy or smelly, because they didn't wash their teacups. It's all these soft, human-y things.
Yeah.
And they seem to have a bigger impact. And also on the people with the things, you go to bed, the wall's half knocked down, you wake up in the morning, it's half knocked down. But the person is on your side the night before, goes to bed, comes back the next day, and decides that what you've agreed is wrong. So there was far more complexity on what I call the soft side than the hard side. So I wanted to try and explain how, in the book, how projects worked, why they all failed systematically, and what you could do about it. So really on the how to fix the problem from where you are, not here's a nice case study. These guys did a great project. They're wonderful, etc. So, and I didn't manage to write the voice into the book because it's this
probably
is
just as well.
Great. Okay. Does that help? Does that explain?
It does. It does. And I think the bit I think most people kind of latch onto, and I certainly did on my first reading, is these 4 different types of projects. Not the vampire project, not the poltergeist projects, but the idea that projects can be characterized by 2 very important criteria: the extent to which you're clear about what you're trying to achieve, and the extent to which you know the method you're going to follow, and that gives us 4 project types. And I always said to clients, my specialism was quest project, where you're very clear what you're trying to achieve, but we're trying to achieve something we've not done before. So I worked on projects on deregulation of industries in the late 90s, and the Millennium Project, and some very early internet projects where the client had a clear idea what they wanted to do, but nobody had done it before, and that made them very exciting. And we categorize projects into those kind of your 4 categories of quest projects, walking in fog, painting by numbers, and making movie projects. And that was great in a world where all the projects we were doing would now be talked about as predictive project management.
Yes.
Albeit we used iterative ideas, we used incrementality, we cycled through, we delivered incrementally. But I wonder how your thinking has evolved and how you see the applicability of that to a world where many project managers are delivering what we would now call agile projects, and arguably everything's hybrid, and we're all delivering some sort of hybrid on the spectrum from predictive at one end to hybrid on the other. So how does your thinking kind of map onto that? Is it still current?
That's a really, really great question. So just to give some context about, you've explained about the project types. And for most people now, that's sort of obviously not all projects have a beginning, middle, and end and can be defined. But at the time I actually proposed it, I got into trouble. I did this conference in Trondheim. It was actually at a conference called the Internet. In those days, the Internet was the project managers conference. Okay,
I remember. They had to change their name.
And I presented what I'd come across with these 4 project types, because they'd fallen out of real things. I think one was the banks trying to put in place the SWIFT project. They didn't know what they were doing, didn't know how they were doing. It was obvious fog. They put their best project leader on it, someone who'd done lots of paint by numbers, and the person had failed. They brought their second best good paint by numbers person, failed. Didn't know how to run a fog. So on. So I presented this, and I got a bum fight in the audience. Basically, what happened was one person stood up and said, "I've never heard Dr. Obeng said something. I've never heard so much rubbish." And then someone else stood up and said, "No, I've seen these elements." And they started arguing amongst themselves. So what's important to understand is the framework was quite a breakthrough.
Yeah.
But the framework was explaining the types of change situation.
Yeah.
And I was always into all change. I'm not a consultant, I'm an educator. So I'm not out selling my methodologies like a crazy person, okay?
Yeah.
So people would look at all change and they'd say, "We like prints," and they'd be selling prints. And I go, "Great with prints, but fits really well in paint by numbers." And then someone say, "We like rapid parallel prototyping." I go, "Great, but that fits really well with quests." So here's the problem type, and then there's a method which sort of looks with it. And for fogs, I'd always explain to people it's this process of one step at a time where you learn as you go and you deliver the results. And the Agile work came out of software development, and it started to fit quite well with fogs in particular, and a little bit on the quest and movie. You can sort of adapt for that. It doesn't feel very well for paint by numbers. It depends on what you do with it. But it took on a life of its own. So instead of saying the problem is foggy, we need to use an Agile method. How should we use Agile in a foggy situation? Well, one step at a time, bring in the stakeholders and so on. Okay, but this one's a bit more quest-like. So if we're using that Agile methodology, what do? Well, we probably want to try 3 or 4 things, like sending 3 or 4 nights off on the quest in parallel. Then we bring them together and so on. But what seemed to happen with Agile was it became a thing on its own.
Yeah.
As opposed to a solution to different types of change.
Yeah.
To the point where people now say things like Agilism project, or are you talking about capital A Agile or small a Agile? And so I'm struggling to answer your question, because it has a sort of it's like an entire ecosystem belief system.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sort of upset the Agile people, but in reality, you have a problem, you got to figure out how to deal with the problem. So if the problem is completely unknown, a quick way out, and I'm not doing like the complicated complex model, a quick way out is to use the 4 types which tell you how to act.
Yeah.
And what methods might work. They tell you which stakeholders to look for. They tell you how much emotion there'll be. It gives you a clue into who would be a good person in the project.
Yeah.
And then you can get on with it.
I have to say that was my favorite part of the book, the models for what kind of leaders you need for each type of project and what kind of teams you need to develop. I thought that was great. But don't worry that you didn't give in your mind, a clear enough answer, because to me, this is the joy of doing these interviews. When I do my videos, it's a very kind of one-way thing. And as an educator, for me, the really exciting bit is stimulating the debate, getting people in the audience arguing about the ideas, and just hearing you talk about all those ideas in that short snippet. There are so many ideas there for people to think about. I think that's really great. And you are a consummate ideas person. You've been generating new ideas ever since. And one that attracts me is this idea of smart failure, which I think is actually a nice follow-on from what you just said, if I understand the concept correctly. So could you tell us a little bit about smart failure?
Sure. There's context. Can I do a bit of context? So
take it away.
So when I worked with Ellie Goldratt, one of the things which I learned from him was he used to talk about the accounting world versus the manufacturing world. Because at the time, the accountants had taken over manufacturing and they had a mindset. And so they'd look, maybe you've got 50 units, and they go, which one has the highest cost of production per unit? Okay. And then they say, we're not making that. And they'd get rid of that one. So now you have 49 units, but the same fixed cost. So of course there'll be a highest one. And they were basically killing off businesses by using the wrong mental model. Yeah. And I took inspiration from that because I was also starting to research at the time where companies were starting to internationalize and starting to globalize and starting to merge. Yeah. Technology was coming forward in terms of things like the internet. And literally you could see the pace of change accelerating. Yeah. And when you looked at most organizations, they were still on annual planning cycles and all those crazy things. Yeah. And so I realized that the pace of change was accelerating, but our ability to learn was pretty flat. Yeah. The faster you learn, the more likely you are to be in a situation which is less complex, more simple, more easy to define as paint by numbers. The slower you learn, the more likely you are to find yourself in the fog. Yeah. So that was the big project I was working on, out of which fell the project types. Yeah. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. So once you understand that whole new world thing, then you realize that if you're in a world which is changing faster than you can learn, literally everything changes. So most of my career has actually been working through different topics to explain what's going on and why things don't work. So I did all change, obviously. I then did one on strategy, putting strategy to work, to explain why strategy isn't about fitting your business to your pests and swats, because the world's changing, etc. I did one on money, why even things like budgets don't make any sense anymore, because the pace is so fast that you can't predict as far as you would like to make the budget make sense. So you have to give empowerment to people so they can make good business decisions non-centrally. I went through leadership, innovation, and so on. So I've been working on all these different areas, and I've forgotten the question you asked me anyway.
It's really because you're starting to answer the question I was going to ask you next, as it happens. But this question was really about the smart failure idea.
Smart failure. Okay, so smart failure comes from the innovation end of the spectrum. Yeah. So once you understand the world is accelerating, you also realize that if it's accelerating and the learning is flat, there'll be a point which crosses over. So in my videos, I talk about midnight. I say it all changed at midnight and when everyone was asleep and they didn't notice, they carried on as they were. But once you get that idea, you realize that if you're working in an environment where you can learn fast and the world is changing, then the intelligent thing is to find the most experienced person and literally do what they say. Yeah. And that's the basis of things like, I also wrote about organization designs. That's the basis of a hierarchy. Smartest, more competent person tells everyone else what to do. And that's great. In that world, if you get something wrong, now you're in trouble because somebody knows how to do it. You could have asked. Yeah. So failure was bad. So all the time we were growing up, you failed. It's a bad thing. Bad, failed. Okay. Failure is always bad. And it's correct that failure should be bad. Yeah. As the world started speeding up, you got people going things like, failure is not so bad. But of course, we were brought up knowing failure was bad. So no one took anyone who said experiment, try things out seriously because you didn't want to fail. Mm. But the reality, of course, is that if the world's changing faster than you can learn, then sometimes you have to take on board tasks, bogs, whatever.
Yeah.
You'll do your best. You get the leader right. You get the team member right. You'll all the things you do right. But remember, the world's changing faster than you can learn. So it might be the world changed, or maybe you couldn't learn fast enough. So it will go wrong, even though you did all the best things. And so that's what I call smart failure.
Yeah.
It's failure which happens despite you doing all the right things, because the world is complex. Yeah. And for that failure, as opposed to normal failure, you should get extra bonus points.
Yeah.
The little halo around your head, so it'll shine a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only really failure if you're not learning from it, I guess.
It can be failure even if you do learn, because it's complicated with failure. It's very fashionable now to say projects don't fail because look at the Sydney Opera House. It costs too much, but they're still using it. Yeah. But the way I see it is, you're in a world which is changing. You have a goal you aim for. You're trying to get to it. If you get to it, well done. If you miss it, or the process of getting there is bad for all the stakeholders, okay, that would be what I would call failure.
Yeah.
If you get halfway through and the stakeholders are telling you to move, or you discover the goal has moved and you change it and you do something different from your original idea, that's not failure. Yeah. But it's if you sort of sit around and just continue doing things badly, and then when it's all overspent and it didn't work and the benefits case didn't happen, then you say, but in 100 years' time, it will be seen as a real pyramid and people will travel for miles to see us. No, it's a failure, sorry. It just is. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Actually, I think you're right. I think you put your finger on something. There is that kind of thing that, well, there's no such thing as failure. There's just feedback.
There is.
But yeah, absolutely. And we can argue all day over what is a failure, but understanding that you can do the right things and still fail is interesting. And actually the moment for me, I don't know whether listeners picked it up, but for me, a really kind of big moment of insight that you just said, which kind of adds to my understanding, was effectively the classification of project is a relative classification based on where you are in your learning and understanding. Because one of the things I bang on about for project managers is the need to keep learning. On my other YouTube channel, that is my sign off to every video: keep learning. And that's how we protect ourselves in a changing world as professionals. So that's great. And you've started to answer this question, but it does seem to me like there is a clear through line from your early work to today. And yes, you've written about, you've taught about a whole range of different subjects, but there does seem to be that kind of connection, that the theme of change is embedded in it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Can you say a bit more about how the different ideas you've had connect, and perhaps give us a flavor from things that project managers might want to look into, or even books they might want to buy?
Sure, I'm not worried about the books. I mean, these days, I often will take the book PDF and just put it on the web, because So one of the things which happened and happens to our organizations was we used to do this thing called innovation.
Yeah.
And innovation is very weird, because if you say projects, innovation, you go, well, how do you do an innovation project? Well, the reality is often innovation projects are not paint by numbers. And so you get forced into the other three types of project.
Yeah.
So I did a huge piece of work training up people in Agile, the big design company, helping them to reinvent themselves, to think about innovation. And in the design world, lots of people use the project types because they've all gone through the same thought process. Okay. So innovation was quite crucial, because innovative projects are like normal projects, but usually for Quest or movie. And they're a bit weird because they have people in them. And worst of all, they have people and ideas. Have you noticed how all your own ideas are brilliant, Mike? Have you noticed how you fall in love with them?
But the reality is, yours might not all be brilliant ideas, but mine absolutely are.
Yours absolutely are, and you love all of them. And there's something to do with the way the brain works. When you have an idea, you fall in love with it. It goes all the way back to hunter-gatherers, where the brain was burning energy faster than the muscle. So it made sense to have a little policeman in your neck down here, which says, if you have an idea, fall in love with it and turn it into more food. That's why everyone thinks their ideas are great.
Absolutely. And it is really not your fault when your ideas don't work. It's obviously everyone else not appreciating them.
Absolutely. It's just they didn't get it.
People again.
People, always people. But what it means is that that the stakeholder engagement and management process on an innovation project, you just need to be much better.
Yeah.
I have the story I tell about the ugly baby, basically explaining how ideas work and how hard it is to get them across and how much people hold on to them. And I say, after you watch this podcast, for example, you'll leave with all these examples and your ideas and things like, and you'll rush to your team and say, hey, I just saw Mike's podcast. We should all do. And when you present your ideas, they'll all say, yes, that's fantastic. Let's stop everything we're doing and do what you say. No, they never do that, do they? They never do that. They sort of fold their arms. And if you're the boss, you have to say it again. Look, this is really good because, and they fold their arms. And then you say, what do you think? And what you've done is you've taken your brand new idea, we often call your idea your baby, and you presented it saying, look at this beautiful baby. And everyone in the team has gone, it's ugly. Okay? And then you say, what do you think? And they go, well, I'm not sure it'll work. And you say, look at its beautiful eyes. And you start using logic. Doesn't work. They go, ugly baby. And you're the boss. So eventually they go, yes, 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 good baby. And then they leave, and in the corridor, you see them look over their shoulder and go, ugly baby back there. Yeah. So there's a quite complex thing in an innovation of ideas, people falling in love with the ideas, high levels of emotion, the need to be able to overcome resistance to change, to really engage people and so on. And in many project situations, people that aren't given the soft skills at that level to be able to do things. So I use, if you know my work, you know I have these people engagement tools, performance and engagement tools. I call them PETs. Yep. So I have specific PETs, specific tools about things like, how do you get turkeys to vote for an early Christmas, for example? And so you can use that tool on an innovation project over and above your project management skills to get people to vote, to agree to stuff which may not be in their best interest, but is overall best for the project. That tool, for example, is called IDQB. So that type of thing is all linked in the same way. There's leadership stuff. And again, in the book, there's how do you lead people? The strategy. Chances are, if you're running a strategy, it connects with the project, because if you can't execute it, what's the point? Yeah. So, and often these days, it makes more sense to look at what's executable alongside what the strategy should be. Yeah. As opposed to, we've got this great strategy, we can't make it happen. Oh, well, so there's a sort of duality to it. So there are lots of different areas which project managers will extend into. Transformation, very popular word. Yeah. Everyone uses it interchangeably with the words project and change. Yeah. It's like transformation, project, transformation, change. No, they're completely different things. So my favorite background is this one here. I don't know whether you can see, but there's sort of like
we can see that,
caterpillars over here, and there's a butterfly over here.
Yeah.
And I use this a lot because people come to me and they say, Eddie, we're trying to do digital transformation. Where are we going wrong? Or we've got AI to integrate our digital transformation strategy, or whatever it is. And I go, so tell me about it. And what usually means is they've got their existing process. You know how sometimes if you have to go to a wedding and you've not got a new suit, you buy a little new handkerchief to make your suit look as if it's not the old one.
Yeah, transform it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what they do is they go the same old rubbish process, and they go, well, we've got some AI, let's tag it on top of it. Yeah. And they go, that's our transformation digitally, or whatever it is. Or they say things like, we'll have everyone working from home. Oh, so what are they going to be doing differently? Well, they'll have their laptop. Is it that new behaviors, new software, different collab? No, same way as they would do in the office. In fact, we want that because it's efficient. So they're not talking about transformation. Look, a butterfly is not a caterpillar with wings stuck on it. Yeah. It's not, is it? You take a caterpillar whose job is to eat leaves, get fat. Those are its KPIs. That's what caterpillar life success is like. Butterfly KPIs, drink nectar and fly. Look really cool, okay? Not connected. Caterpillars cannot give you flying lessons. Yeah. Transformation means you take that, you keep it alive, you go through a metamorphosis where you build scaffolding, things you may never need as a butterfly, and you learn and emerge as a butterfly. Yeah. It's not the same as change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Transformation tends not to take off from paint by numbers, tends to take off from the others, especially fog. Yeah. Companies who love taking themes and fashions like digital transformation or automation or all those things, they don't like fog. Yeah. So they won't let the transformation start from fog. Yeah. So they're already predestined to fail. Yeah. It's just they don't know they've failed yet. It takes them 18 months and tens of millions of pounds to realize they failed.
Yeah. It's what one of my former clients used to refer to as putting lipstick on a pig.
That's very good.
It's interesting. You've mentioned one of the topics which I want to kind of focus my learning on next year, or well, actually starting this year, really, AI. But I think it would be remiss of me if I didn't ask one of the leading thinkers on project management about what trends you see are going to really affect the future of project management, and what do project managers really need to be engaging with to prepare themselves for the next 10 years.
Yeah. So I once wrote an article. Okay, so when they started with self-driving cars, so it's got to be at least 8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
I got very interested and I started trying to work out how they worked. And a self-driving car has, I think it's, oh God, I can't remember, 6 or 7 systems. It has a LiDAR system, which is like a radar which doesn't go too far. It has cameras which look far away. It has infrared, etc. It has about 6 systems. It integrates those systems, and therefore it can drive itself. So I said, well, if it's a project, what's our equivalent of short-term LiDAR, long-term radar, etc.? And there's an article in one of the magazines somewhere. And I said, if you had all those things, you might be able to have a self-driving project. It was tongue-in-cheek, but I was totally serious.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, when you're going on holiday as a project manager, all of a sudden, you manage to make your project self-driving. So we do know how to do it, because you're not there.
Well,
so
I think most of us depend on finding a co-driver to take to take a share at the wheel.
You brief them, you tell them what's important, what's not important. You do all the things a self-driving car would be. You even give them instructions on how to make the decisions. Whatever it is, make sure it's cheap. Don't make it fast. Whatever it is, okay? So we know how to do that. So that's one element which says we understand these things. And in All Change, I described the bubble diagram. There's a new edition of All Change coming out where I put the actual bubble diagram picture in the book.
Oh, right.
So many people ask me about, what's this bubble diagram? So I actually put the picture. So there'll be a photograph of all the bubbles which explain why projects go wrong.
Fantastic.
So, so that's one element. But the other thing which is also hitting us is, let's go back to projects not succeeding. If 75% of your projects don't work, and everyone's excited about things like sustainability, I would never run a sustainability project. I just get the projects I'm currently running on to work, because I've got 75% with vast amounts of waste in there.
Yeah.
So it would make much more sense to deal with the waste which I'm doing than go and run another project.
Yeah, every project now should be sustainable.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Should be perfect.
Yeah.
So one of my clients, a chap called Simon Cooper, came to me about 6-7 years ago. I can't remember when it was, maybe slightly longer. And he said, Eddie, it was a JP Morgan. I'd worked with them. And he said, we'd like all our projects to be perfect. So I laughed. So he said, no, I mean it. We want perfect projects. I laughed. I said, no, I mean it. So I said, okay, let's do some research. So I started researching why projects weren't perfect for myself. And the first thing I discovered, which made me sort of stop in my tracks, was this. If you run a project in a company which is high performance and the project goes really well, no problems, you never get promoted because you never meet the senior people.
Yeah, because
no one knows how hard it was. They assume it was easy. So if you've got any brains, you let it go slightly off the track so you can report it to your boss and say, this has gone off the track. I'm going to try to fix it. Then you come, this is my proposal to fix it. And then you fix it. And they go, wow, Eddie, no flies on you. Okay? So what I discovered was project managers, it was not in their interest to deliver perfect project.
Yeah.
I'd never really realized that particular cultural element.
Yeah.
And then in the conversations, I also had conversations like, well, do you know beforehand what's going to go wrong in the project? And they go, well, yeah, we know that type of project that the traders always mess up. And what I realized when I spoke more widely is everyone sort of has a pretty good idea of all the things that are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And yet they go wrong.
Yeah.
Why? You can fix them in advance. You see, there's no culture of prelimination. There's a risk management culture where we go, what are the risks? And we write them all down. Then we put them in a book and stick them on a shelf. But there's nothing which says pre-eliminate them.
Yeah.
It's not a project culture normally. So from that, I started realizing that if you were going to run perfect projects, it was a cultural and mindset approach supported by some tools and some behaviors. And the first thing we did was we changed the reward mechanism. So, so normally you're running a project, they go, these are your targets, okay? And then you run the project. We said, no, 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 no. Before the project starts, we're going to sit everyone in a room and say, what's going to go wrong with this project? And we're going to future map it, okay? And I have a method, it's called glide path. And so we write down all the things that are going to go wrong. And then we'll say, okay, right, now you as project leader, you can see all the things that are going to go wrong. If any of those go wrong, basic negative points, you're not going to get your bonus. Yeah. If new things come along we hadn't thought of, and you fix them beforehand, you get a bonus. If you fix them after they've happened, you get a half bonus. Yeah. It's your interest to show what would have gone wrong and that you fixed it before it became an issue.
Yeah.
So we're starting to shift the culture. So now you start moving more towards perfect projects, or what I call project zero, than you'd had before.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's going to be one of the key things. Current projects make literally no sense. I still teach project management, but it makes less and less sense to me, because what it is, you see, even with Agile, you make a plan, and then at the next end of that particular drum beat, whatever you call it, you look back at the plan. What did we achieve?
Yeah.
If it's waterfall paint by numbers, you make your plan, you look back. It's like you're driving your car, and instead of actually looking at the forward windscreen, you're looking just at the mirrors.
Yeah.
You look at the sat nav, and then you just look at the mirrors, rear view mirror. That is insane. The entire culture is looking through the rear view mirrors. And what we did in that organization with my zero approach is we started to change and say, look out through the front window. Yeah. And when you look out through the front window, the whole spectrum changes. And I think people are slowly beginning to understand that. I've written about it, and early days, I just got the same response of everyone laughing, going, perfect projects. But now people are paying more attention. And I've written it all up. It's all over the place in books, and it'll be in the new All Change book as well. But how you do that is relatively straightforward, but it's cultural and behavioral with a few tools.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And it tallies with the things I'm learning about AI and how they might fit in the project world. Because if you can get AI systems to work, then they should be able to predict what's in front of you rather than tell you about what you've just gone past. The real challenge, though, of course, is that it's a related challenge to the one you discovered, which is that organizations don't store baselines. They store the final plan that they deliver against. So when you go back and look at the data of projects, you actually find, we delivered most of our projects on time. We delivered most of our projects to budget. But actually what you delivered it to was the amended schedule and the amended budget that got signed off 6 weeks before completion. When companies start getting honest about recording good quality data, then the AI can say, oh, look, that thing that happened 16 times before is about to happen again. And so instead of showing you what you just done, it's showing you what's going to happen based on the fact that it happened to 16 people in the past.
So these honest companies, where would I find them?
I don't know. I'm relying on you to use your influence to persuade some of these companies to become.
Bad news. It'll never happen. The AI for predicting stuff. It's a lovely idea. It will never happen. It's never going to happen. There are no honest companies.
See, now I can't remember who the quote was from, but there is a famous quote in the world of science. You might have heard it because you're an engineer, which is nearly a scientist, where it said, if experienced old experts tell you that something is possible, then it almost certainly is. But if experienced old experts tell you it isn't possible, then they're probably wrong. And I have to say, you and I are now getting to that age where we are more likely to be wrong when we say things can't happen.
I was asking you where they were. It's just curiosity to find out where these honest companies.
These are the companies that are actually so enamored with your idea of a perfect project that they're prepared to pay the price of honesty to get it.
I'm sure I shall find some shortly.
Because that is the price of perfection is honesty. You have to, you can't create a perfect project.
You're absolutely spot on, but it's a little bit more complex than that because human beings find it very difficult to see reality. So just very quickly, just so you understand how hard data is when people start talking about AI, and I'm always just slightly intrigued. So you've got two halves to your brain, two processors, heart, okay, stomach. They've each got their own little processor. Your heart doesn't beat because your brain tells it. Your stomach digests food even though you're not thinking about it. They're connected to the vagus nerve. You feel like one person. It's an illusion. You are several processing units.
And plus billions of microbes.
Yes. So the processing units form this story called an ego. The ego is really important because the ego makes you feel like one. But more importantly, when life gets tough, the ego tells you how marvelous you are. Yeah. Because otherwise you would give up. You know, when the saber-toothed tiger comes at you, you go, oh, well, I'm not worth it. So, but you say, no, you must do it because you're worth it. Run faster. Okay. That's right. Very important. In that ego mechanism, it allows you to do things like, if you believe something like your experienced managers and new information comes along, now the ego has a problem because you're wonderful and you're worth it and you're perfect. If what's coming along is different from what you believed, now it makes you an idiot. Yeah. So your ego is smart enough to make sure you don't really hear what you've heard and makes up a story so that you come out on top. It's called cognitive dissonance. Yeah. So being able to actually see what's in front of you is really hard because we've got billions of years of evolution stopping you seeing anything which shouldn't be there from your expectation. Yeah. And at confirmation the same time, bias. Correct. And then at the same time, the ego does the confirmation bias, which pulls in data which might not be true. So seeing that is difficult. And then on top of that, even if you could get the data, you now have a problem, which is reality is not so easy to see. Story I tell people is, for billions of years, people thought that the sun went around the earth. Why do they think that? Were they stupid? No, it's because it looks like the sun goes around the earth. Yeah. Some people thought that the earth was covered in a big bowl. Half of it was blue, half of it was black. There was a yellow thing on the blue bit, there was a white bit, and the bowl rotated. Yeah. And that's how we got the sun day and night. And why do they think that? Because that's how it looks. Yeah, we, of course, we now know that the earth goes around the sun. Yeah. Well done to us. But the reason you have night and day is not because the earth goes around the sun, it's because the earth's rotating. That's four things which look exactly the same. Yeah. People could have opinions on all of them. Firm opinions, all deluded. Yeah. Because to test reality, you can't find reality. You can check it's not true. And there are only 5 methods for doing that. And most people have never been taught how to actually get data which is right, or rather not wrong. Method number 1, scientific method, it's closed off to everyone else except scientists, because we've all got such big egos, we cheat and fix the data. Second method is prediction. If this is true, that should happen. That's what I use in the Socratic, the bubble diagram. That's really useful because then you can see if your prediction didn't come true, your hypothesis is wrong. Yeah. Third method, Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark. Yeah. Well, if that's true, that should never happen. Oh, it's happening. That's why it's not true. Yep. Yeah. Fourth method, baby method. Baby sees something, touches it, puts it in its mouth, multiple senses. So somebody says, our projects are running really well. We'll ask the customers, we'll ask the suppliers. When do we go and have a look on the ground and see if there's a hole there? Multiple senses, the projects aren't running well, you know? So that's the, and then the fifth one, of course, is nature. Anything anyone suggests which doesn't happen in nature is probably just fiction. Because nature has been learning for billions of years. So even if you could get past the confirmation bias and the cognitive dissonance and you got data, you then need to apply one of these 5 methods at least to find out if your data is actually matching reality. And then you can throw your AI at it in order to make your predictions. So I'm sure it'll work in that company we haven't found, which is honest. Okay. But if you ask me to invest my money, I would probably decline. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Long answer, short question.
Investment advice from Dr. Obeng.
I don't know liability.
I am now going to have to put a mandatory YouTube advice note saying that Dr. Obeng is not qualified to offer investment advice. This has been a delight, and I just wish we had another couple of hours, but I think we do need to wrap up for your sanity and my audience's, if not for mine. People will, I'm sure, want to find out more about your ideas and what you do. What's the best way for people to learn about what you do and to engage with you, Eddie?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and I post there. I post a range of things, from things like Pet of the Week, which is a useful tool, right the way through to very controversial stuff. Because I'm not looking for any plaudits from anyone. So if something doesn't make sense, I will say this particular emperor has no clothes. Okay. So if you're following me because you want some easy things, you'll get the easy, useful things. But I'll also challenge some things like yesterday I posted about today I shall be mostly moving at the speed of science. I don't know whether you get that joke or not, but it's very funny, isn't it? So sometimes I just post funny things because something is broken in the system. So LinkedIn is a good place. I also do Twitter, so you can pick me up on that. I tend to be pretty irreverent there as well. I spend most of my life on Cube, which is, if you don't know Cube, it's basically, you know, when Zuckerberg tried to make the metaverse and he got it wrong, so people don't like it and they put on headsets and throw up. So all the things you don't like about the metaverse, take all of those out, add in all the good things you like about being in a fun place, on an event, on a course, laughter, chatting, eating. That's Cube. Okay. So I spend all my time down. We have multiple campuses. I teach there, I run workshops. We have this thing called Cube at Work, about once a month, which we run with the Major Projects Association, where we take a project challenge. It's free. Come on that. I also run Inspiration on Cube, which runs about once every 2-3 months. And we have a different theme. And if you get into the right place on the LinkedIn, you'll get an invitation. We usually have about 20 people. It's a real blast. And then I run proper stuff, which then makes money for the team and stuff like that. So that's what I tend to be doing. But I still talk about project management and try to get people to realize that we as project managers, we own the future. If we drive projects which make sense and we drive them really well, the world has a great future. Nobody can change anything without us. We are the people who deliver. So we have to broaden our mindset of what is real and what's good and what's going to be the right type of solution, put our effort into those. And when they give us NAF projects, don't run them so well, or don't run them at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
We create the future. Yeah. It's us. Was that useful?
It was fantastic. Eddie, I'm thinking of changing the title of this video from All Change to Astounding. It's been an absolute delight to speak with you. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Eddie Obeng,
thank you very much.
You.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Nice session. Fantastic. Thank you.
Please do give us a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be creating loads more great project management content, so please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.